Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the value of your network, the value of every interaction that you have, and how to leverage that, not just for the transaction that it's part of, but the real value of it long term, that we make these investments, we take the time, and how do we get more out of it and build relationships with people. And this may be viewed as old school to some of you, but that technology is pushing us away from what really works in sales. Unless somebody's in market, knows what you do, wants it, has already built up that need, we have to do that with them. So before we get into it, I want to make sure that everybody who's in Start the Conversation, Get the Meeting, checks out this week's episode of Office Hours. I've got an offer in there for you. So make sure you check that out. For the people in the other course, Closing the Complex Sale, it'll be in Office Hours this week coming up. And if you're considering closing the complex sale, the price is going up. The price is going up on both of them by the end of January. So get in now, lock in that price. You'll already get all the existing office hours, so 25 hours from last year and the whole next year. And if you start the Closing the Complex Sale, you will get the course, A Year to Excellence, free of charge. It'll be built into the course over this year, and you'll get, of course, the Questions That Sell, just released in beta. Check it out. And if you want to set up a time to talk to me, go to b2brevenue.com and click on training, and you can get on my schedule. We can talk over the courses, see if they're right for you. Also, make sure you're checking out nudge.ai. Use the Brutal Truth coupon code. You get a 1 month free. Check it out. They're really coming up with great stuff this year. It's really expanding fast, showing you the relationships between you and your customers and how best to get in, what they're talking about on social and what they care about, as well as Pipedrive. Pipedrive has the same coupon code, Brutal Truth. Let's get into this right now. I'll sum it up at the end. And here we go. Here's Gary.
Lead the sales of G Suite in the public sector at Google, and I'm also an executive coach in the Washington community to business owners and sales leaders.
And we were talking before I turned the recorder on about you being passionate about helping salespeople and, creating organic, natural relationships. How'd you get interested in that?
It just kind of evolved over the course of being in sales, frontline sales, business development, and a sales leader for over 30 years. I began to become aware, and more importantly, people began to tell me that I had an ability that they were attracted to help people form authentic relationships in sales environments. And so I started to listen to what people were saying to me and went off and got some training and certification to broaden and deepen my skills so I could be of greater service to others.
And so what did you come up with? Did you have a particular process, or is it coaching?
Well, it's a little bit of that word that gets used so much these days called coaching, but it's also consulting. The difference is this: in coaching, we help clients find the answer that we believe exists within them. In consulting, you usually pay a consultant to solve a difficult problem or provide you an answer. What I've found for business owners and sales leaders is that they want a little bit of both. They want deeper insight so that they can improve their skills and their outcomes on their own, excuse me, but they also want somebody to bounce ideas off of for hard situations in the moment. And then I developed a mechanism which kind of combines both of those things, which is called Don't Just Text, Connect.
And what do you mean by that?
With all the digital media that we have in our life today, you can't escape it. You get on a bus, you walk down a sidewalk, you go to a business meeting, everybody's on their mobile device, their phone, for everything. And we're losing something with that in terms of human connection. And what I've found is that people appreciate tuning up that human connection muscle and integrating it into our digital lives, and thus focusing on ways to connect with prospects and existing customers with more the human edge than the digital edge is something that people appreciate and they can actually measure, they can get value out of. And that's what Don't Just Text Connect is about.
And what do you see people doing wrong today?
Relying on digital connection before you,
Yeah.
I mean, it's so simple. It always amazes me when I'm delivering to an audience or even walking into a meeting. I like to play a little game with myself. How long will it be before somebody looks at their digital device? What sort of envelope can I paint in the room so that people are so attracted to what's happening in the human realm versus the digital realm that they'll stay present? So I share that little story with you because my observation is that people are just relying on their digital devices for learning about people, which is a good start, but then connecting with people has to have a human element to it versus just the digital.
And do you see salespeople just being focused on pitching, telling them who they are and what they do versus showing interest in the other person? Or
I see salespeople using some great sources of information gathering, whether it's LinkedIn or a variety of other online sources, and I recommend that people do that. But they're not necessarily spending enough time researching and learning before they begin pitching. So, when you go to a doctor and you leave that doctor's appointment and you psychologically feel like you feel better, probably one of the reasons that's the case is because the doctor has asked you a lot of questions. And before they even come into the exam room, they're looking at your chart of the paperwork that you've filled out, of the information that you've provided to the nurse. So they're building a bubble of information around you before they even begin to interface with you. If salespeople would consider an approach like that, doing a lot of research and then step into the human and the digital realm, I think a lot of people might be more efficient in their close rate and also building deeper relationships.
And when you go about, getting into a new account, what do you do?
I like to spend a 70-30 ratio of research, investigate, and study before I actually even speak to or even reach out to a person in a particular account. A recent study from Corporate Executive Board showed that 56% of sales are made or decided in the mind of the buyer before the contact is actually made from a salesperson. So that tells me that customers are so savvy today, they're doing a great deal of research on their own. And that makes it incumbent upon me to know what they know and then to further know what pains and problems they have that are likely not being addressed already. And thirdly, to then use that research to construct an inquisition or a query or a challenge that's going to get their attention and have some meaning to them. Otherwise, that'll be one phone that'll be hung up.
Yeah, and I mean that's good when something's inbound, where they, that statistic I can kind of understand, but I talk to people all the time, and doesn't sound like they're 53% way through the process. Sounds like they're 5%. They may feel like they're 53%. And how do you ever judge that?
I'd have to go back to the research that CEB did. So I don't know how. I know how I judge it from a gut check standpoint and from a feeling standpoint. I can either ask questions and or discern in somebody's tone of voice and their answers back to me if they're researched on a topic, executive coaching, for example, how much research they've done on it, how much research they've done on me, and so I can tell from their answers to my questions and their answers to the inquisitions that I put out there, how far down the path they might be in their sales decision cycle. And plus, you can just ask very basic sales questions to find out, do you have a problem that I can help you solve today based on what we've discussed so far in the research I've done before the call? Something like that is very direct and very useful.
Yeah. But now, like at Google, where you're selling something, I guess they know what it is, right? And they know what it does. What type of challenges do you run into? Is it replacing something? Is it cost? Is it political change? Is it all that?
Well, it's certainly all those things, and you'd be surprised because certainly Google, after 20 years, enjoys the position of one of the top three best known brands in the world. So, Google Search, Android, Maps, YouTube. There's 8 properties that Google has that have over 1 billion users. So certainly it's table stakes that Google has earned its way into that position in the market. But Google has lots of products and services that don't enjoy that same status in terms of user familiarity. And being a person who likes to help raise things up even further than where they are, that would be me. I'm helping Google elevate the value of G Suite to customers who may not already be familiar with it. G Suite is that set of collaboration tools once known as Google Apps and Google Apps for Work that make it easy and intuitive for people to collaborate in the human and digital world. And so in that marketplace, I'm often helping other salespeople find ways to work with customers who may already be using a competitor's product.
So it's kind of a swap out, which is a pretty hard sale, isn't it?
It's a very hard sale. People are extremely comfortable with what they know. They're extremely comfortable with what they're already paying for.
Yeah.
And objects in motion tend to stay in motion.
Yeah. Well, what's your approach for like the swap out? Because I've been in that type of business also, and it is difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And it goes back to what I was talking about a few minutes ago, which is the research up front. I'm so big on, again, 70% research and study and 30% human interaction and digital connection. So I advise and I myself practice a lot of researching why an entity, commercial or government, has a goal, usually not technology related, but business or process related, that may not be currently met by their current solution. And then I dig there, and I dig there deep. And then I dig sideways as well as down until I find information that says there's a problem here that they may not be aware of, a risk that I can help them avoid if I expose them to it now, for which I may be in a position to help them.
Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
Well, I'm not always in that position. I think that's the other pause that I wanted to make is it may be that I find out information that I'm not in a position to help them with, and then I need to move away from that or make it known to them and offer a colleague who could help them.
And when you're doing your research, what are you looking for and how do you do it?
Let's take an example. Let's say it's the state of XYZ, and they have issues in the news in many sources online of an opioid crisis or of a revenue crisis or legislation that needs more input from the citizen, the lay citizen, and certain business leaders and certain sectors. I'm looking for first of all, I'm looking for those problems. So I'm reading their plans. I'm reading the news about them. I'm reading the news about people who are in those positions and how effective they are in their jobs. And then I'm finding out how are they currently meeting their goals? What are their next goals that they have to meet? What are the rules and regulations that they're bound by? And I'm assessing their goals, rules, and regulations against their progress. And where there's a gap, then there's a need or a pain that I can point out to them. Or there's a risk that they may not know about that I will point out to them. And that will put me in a position to be seen as a counselor versus a salesperson.
So those first initial conversations are to talk about those things?
Yes, they are. For example, were you aware that the opioid crisis is spreading to 3 other counties in your state, and that the level of fire protection and sheriff resources that you have there is not going to meet the way that the usage is trending upward in those 3 counties? That's a fairly open-ended, provocative question for somebody.
And that's it. And that's that type of thing makes people think differently, think about something that they're not currently looking at.
And yes, Rob, that's exactly what it does. And it also sets them back a little bit. I don't want to set anybody too far back, because
Yeah.
that would be counterproductive. But it causes them to think.
Yeah. And it starts a conversation that's not about your
Exactly.
product.
Oh gosh, no, it's not about the product.
Now,
No.
that's counterintuitive to most salespeople.
As it was, and frankly sometimes still is to me, because I love to sell and I love to talk about my product. I love my product. I'm nuts about my product. But I know that the person who ultimately could benefit my product is not nuts about my product. In fact, they don't really care about my product at all.
No.
It's just a means to an end for something bigger that they have to get done.
And what do you hope to get out of that first initial conversation?
I hope to do a couple things. First, I hope to develop some rapport.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing, and don't just text, connect. It's to develop a connection. And so I often will go left or go right, depending on how that person, man or woman on the other end of the line, wants to go. I also hope to learn a lot. I come well researched, but with only 1 or 2 questions. The idea is not for me to pepper a prospect or a suspect with questions, but just to begin a conversation and to learn. So I take a lot of notes and I do a lot of affirmation and confirming back to them. And then I seek agreement for another communication with them.
And so many reps overlook this. They kind of feel, or they're trying to do everything too fast. They're trying to turn the complex sale and treat it like a simple sale. Have you sensed that, or?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. You mean they oversimplify things too quickly?
Well, the simple sale being a transactional sale, single call, single person.
Right.
Yeah. As opposed to you're looking at it as it's a strategic sale. It's a multi-call, multi-person, high dollar amount.
Right. It's not like going into 7-Eleven and buying a cup of coffee, or even going into your favorite restaurant and picking from off of 5 or 6 things off of a menu. It's more like surveying the people in the neighborhood to see what type of restaurant they'd like to have, what sort of food are they interested in, what's not available to them today, what kind of environment would they like to have to eat their food in. And so another element of Don't Just Text Connect is for the seller themselves to get in touch with their own motivations sometimes, and stepping back to take a look at those. Impatience can be a real detriment to success in sales.
Even more than that, what I see is they're not having empathy for the person they're selling to. They're assuming that somebody's job is to buy their product, since it's our job to sell it. And that's a real dangerous view of the world. And that they feel like if there isn't an immediate interest in a demo, that there's no possibility within that one account, even though it might be the wrong person or the wrong neighbor you're asking about the restaurant. You're trying to figure out, who has influence in that neighborhood, who goes to restaurants, who cares about restaurants, what cultural cuisine do they like,
Right.
coming up with that. And
yeah, and it's so easy. I have a lot of empathy for salespeople, especially a lot of people who are
especially you.
Yeah, exactly. I continue to have self-empathy for the fact that I'm in this wonderful, crazy profession, which I love. But it takes a while, and then it's something that gets relearned to have that empathy and that patience. And one of the things that I do and then I coach and teach is every contact that you build will get recycled and reused in some way. So I never discard anything. I'm a bit of a pack rat in that regard. I'm a pack rat in terms of contacts and interactions with people. In some way, that interaction with that person, even if they have no interest in a restaurant or the food that 10 other people said they wanted in that neighborhood, in some way that person's opinion and interaction can be useful to me, the seller, down the road. So I believe in that in my gut and in my heart, in the universal world of sales, that that interaction can come back to me. And so because of that belief, I don't need to excessively pressure or push that one person that one time.
And I think that's a great way to view it. And I kind of have this term that I call compound selling, where that, every action every day, instead of it being a throwaway, it's evergreen, meaning it comes back to you. You learn something, you invest, you give to get. And instead of looking at it as, it's either they're going to buy or they're not going to buy.
Right.
More, it was like, they're going to buy eventually. I just have to figure out how.
Right. How and when it works for them.
And that's it. And if let's say you have a face-to-face meeting, you're easily investing a minimum of 2 hours of your time, probably more like 8, with all the prep, follow up, the actual meeting, driving there, commuting.
Yeah, easily.
Yeah, and if you don't learn something from it or be able to leverage it again, then that's a day of your life.
Yeah, it's a day of your life. It's several hours, as you just outlined, of your very precious sales time, likely the similarly precious time of engineering, marketing, and other resources at your company. So the question is, how will you use that investment, even if it doesn't result in a sale today? And even just that question hanging out there, Rob, how will you use that investment, even if it doesn't result in a sales today, is a question that can create a shift in the mind of salespeople about the value of their sales effort. Yeah, we all have a pipeline that we need to close. We have quota numbers we need to make today, this week, this month, this quarter, and this year. And we're measured very cleanly and precisely in our industry by that metric. And at the same time, it's also true that we need to build up the evergreen, like you said.
And that's it. And the people who are successful, the people that are, planting these seeds all over the place, helping them by giving to them, either through referrals, networking, connecting them with the things that they want. Because half the time when I was selling, I was a career counselor. I was selling to engineers, and if we didn't have a sale, they'd call me up. Hey, do you know any hot companies that need an engineer? I'm like, sure. And all of a sudden I'm planting somebody who's an advocate into either an existing account, which will make it more referenceable, more successful, or into a new account that will bring me in.
And I bet that created both some short-term, but also some long-term, really positive sales success for you.
Infinitely, because like with one company, our product was so complicated that it required years of use to become effective at it. And I had a handful of consultants that started their own company, and I would use them as a reference. They would bring our product in. They get paid, we get paid, and I just move them all around town. And it saved me because I didn't have to have my pre-sales people tied up on proof of concepts. It shortened the sales cycle, and customers loved it because I solved the whole problem instead of just part of the problem for them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really great example of kind of listening in that probably there was a stem or a seed conversation that you had where a light bulb went off and you realized that bringing in a consultant could solve multiple customers' needs in a bigger way. That's just a great example of really listening and paying attention, even to solve a customer's problem, even if it's not in your toolkit, so to speak.
Yeah. And that's it. I had the same feeling. It's like if I went through, because a lot of my calls were, you had to fly there, so you're spending a whole day just on the meeting, never mind the prep and the follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
And if it didn't get something out of it, right? Especially if you hate to travel and you hate to wait in line and you hate to stay in a hotel and crammed into an airline seat.
Right, eating that terrible food. And by the
Oh.
way, have you sat in an airline seat recently? It's worse than sitting on a box of crushed cardboard. There's like no cushion.
Yeah. And I've got the legs of a basketball player, right? So it's like there's no way to fit them in to a seat, You're just like, oh.
And I've got the legs of a horse jockey, and I'm still uncomfortable. So
Yeah. And that's kind of was my attitude. And it wasn't that I was being difficult. It was just, if you're going to make that investment, and even today, even if it's a web call, it's still a couple hours of your time. And instead of, just talking about your product and their problem, connecting with them as human beings and finding out, what are they up against? What do they care about?
Yeah, that is so crucial. And that is one of the main things that I emphasize with Don't Just Text, Connect, and that I find my clients make progress in. They develop a greater strength in developing that connection when they become aware of and focus on that. That's the magic in the interaction, is the connection. It's really not about the product, no matter what it is. I mean, I don't care if you're talking jet airplanes or carpet samples. It's really not about the product. It's about the connection. And today, people are actually starving for more of that connection. And they'll take it and they'll appreciate it and they'll remember you if that connection even happens in their workplace. So valuing that opportunity, that because we're in the profession of sales, we have the chance to create that connection, is really a way to elevate our role and also our income.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the key elements. It's kind of viewed as old school, but what works is, or what's not working has to be fixed. And I talk to reps all day, and all I hear is not working.
Huh.
That they're
Well, what do you hear is not working? What do they say is not working?
Well, the problem is everyone's doing the playbook from, 10, 15 years ago. The kind of personalized pitch emails of which people get 50 a day. So they're not different.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how good the pitch is, unless you
Mm-hmm.
happen to find the person at the right time.
Right.
I think robocalls this year are going to put the final nail in cold calling.
Mm.
I don't know if you get them, but I get 20 or 30 a day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So who in their right mind is going to pick up a phone call that they don't recognize?
Yeah, it just means that 75-25 ratio of research to actual calling might even shift to 80-20 in 2019, where customizing and differentiating yourself in order to have an opportunity to speak to a human so that you might get a connection is key.
And I think everybody, certainly on the management side, is trying to drive down the cost of sales instead of increase the top line revenue. That they forget what the objective is. So what they do is they get inexperienced college kids, give them automation and technology, but they don't know how to interface with strangers because they never have.
I have to thank you for sharing that insight for me and your listeners, Rob, because I don't know how many people have that broad exposure that it sounds like you do from all the salespeople you talk to. But I find that a little frightening to hear. uh, because sales is a belly-to-belly business, and it's going to start off mouth to ear, in other words, talking to ear. Now, that is what I consider a human connection, because it's not machines, it's still people. We're not face-to-face, but it's still the human element. And if we take that out of selling, then, well, we might as well just give it all over to machines, and I don't think that's ever going to work.
Not unless it's, like Amazon type commodities.
Right.
And kind of like one of the last jobs I had where I was the only outside person. And I still deal with CEOs and VPs of sales now, and they go, and I tell them the way to increase revenue is have an outside field force. Oh, we can't afford it. They go, you can't afford not to.
Right.
And I see companies, if you look at one with an outside field force and one without, the outside one crushes them.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're meeting with people. And anybody who's been a rep on the outside just can tell when you're in front of somebody, that's where the magic happens. That's where you hear the truth. That's where you connect. That's where you understand what they're really up against. That's how you evaluate, is this ever going to happen? Are they full of it? Are they, is their heart in the right place? Is it all about them? That's the only way you can't tell that on a phone call.
Right. Right. That's so true. Those elements that you just mentioned, they are the heart of it. And that authentic connection that gets created when you're face to face with somebody, and anybody listening knows that happens when they're face to face. Following up on that, when you've taken all the effort we discussed a moment ago to put that into motion, following up on that in detail to that person who you met with, here's what I heard you say, Rob. I understood these things are important to you. Rob, you said that you really value XYZ. Rob, I really noted when you said that the thing that's most important to you and critical in the next 30 days is XYZ. That sort of affirmation tells me after we got together, hey, Gary, Rob really heard you. He connected with you. So that's another kind of strength improvement area or skill area that I work with people on quite a bit. And it's a core element of don't just text, connect.
Yeah, I think it goes to, did you really hear what was being said? Did you listen for what wasn't being said?
Yeah.
and it kind of is trying to prove that you did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is, what people call psychological air, meaning that to be heard, to be understood is what everybody wants.
Yeah, that's what everybody wants, is that psychological air. That at Google we call that psychological safety, where you create a safe environment as the leader in that situation to make it okay for that person to themselves be authentic and reveal a little bit more about what they need. That ability to create that psychological safety and that trust environment, that really does need to be taught and practiced. And to your point about those companies being more successful who invest in outside sales forces, that skill doesn't happen over the telephone. It happens, belly to belly.
Yeah. And let's face it, and everyone kind of brags, well, we do huge deals over the phone. And I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying that the likelihood of it happening goes up exponentially once you meet them.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a CEO on, and he spent his whole summer driving around to every customer.
Love that.
And he just raved about it. He goes, I was an outside rep, and we were kind of an inside company due to the price point. I just wanted to spend one summer getting to understand how people are using the product, what they want to do with it. And he goes, it was the most amazing thing, because he could share a meal with them, he got to know each other, and he heard stuff that he never would have heard on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
How much time he spent interviewing people or hiring a research company. And I think this is so overlooked. And I think we're looking at technology as the solution, but it can also be kind of the problem too.
Yeah, it can. And I think it is. And I think it is in the world of sales, because it can be hid behind. It certainly can be hid behind. And the danger there is the erosion of the dare. And as a salesperson, what I mean by erosion of the dare is the dare that we all feel when we're going to put ourselves at risk to have an interaction with somebody who we don't know. It's kind of like making a cold call, which really there should never be a cold call. They should all be warm or pre-called, but still there's risk and there's dare. And that gets eroded if all we have to do is just send out emails to people or make calls. When I was leading a team of cloud salespeople at another company, there was a combination of an inside-outside sales function. So there was inside sales activity and outside sales activity. And in our meetings, I would always challenge people. Are you getting out and seeing your customers? Are you getting out and seeing your partners? Are you discovering what the air is like that they're breathing today or this week? What's changed for them? What are their issues, et cetera, and so forth? So technology, we got to be really careful not to have it take away the dare.
Yeah, I think you're right on there. Hey, I really appreciate your time today. Where do people go to connect with you and learn more about your work?
Yeah, two places, Rob. One is www.garydanoff.com, at Gary Danoff on Twitter, and Coach Gary D on LinkedIn.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that. Gary's a fun guy. And I think if we really take that attitude of our network, each person in it, and just touching them, helping them, and bringing something to them instead of just worrying what we can get out of this transaction, if they are a wasted time or not. And that attitude, that approach is so much more powerful because if you heard him call me Rob a couple of times, the reason for that is he was introduced to me by a friend of mine whose name is Rob, and I think he got confused. But it just goes to show that he was leveraging his network to get expand and meet new people that could help him with his business, people that help get the word out. And these little efforts, these little things tend to mount up, and we tend to only focus on what is going to close right now, and we should, and when we have other time, we should be focused on what can close sooner or later. And sales is a priority thing, and it may sound contradictory because I'm always talking about, prioritize in the order of closure. And I agree with that 100%. But then we have the rest of the day. And the rest of the day, we tend to just go out and try and find totally cold things, as opposed to things that we had touched 3 months ago, 6 months ago, because timing in sales is so critical. The people who are in market and active, they come to us. The people that is the real market are people that shouldn't talk to us, but the timing just isn't right. They don't know what we do yet. They're not even curious. Their level of interest hasn't peaked yet. That's our job. And we can't do it directly. If we do it directly, that's a take. That's not a give. And a give, we have to become creative at because we're not used to that. So I listened to this episode a couple of times because it really is gold. If you really want to get good at this, start the conversation, get the meeting is for you. It takes your whole addressable market, prioritizes it, and I show you a systematic way of doing this that isn't time consuming, isn't cold calling, isn't cold emailing. It's organic, it's natural, and it really is a process to what Gary is talking about. It takes the thinking out of it because it's a lot of work if you do it, one-off every time. But if you have a systematic way of doing it, it's really powerful. If your challenge is you're getting in and talking to people, but the deals are stalling, there's no decision, it's stuck, you're not really sure where it is or where it has to go, and you just need help. Closing the complex sale is for you. And it's just great for anybody who wants to take their game to the next level. And if you're the B player that thinks, oh, I know everything, I've done everything, it's the market, that's the problem, it's my territory. Well, that's not the course for you. I don't know what, I think therapy is the course for you. But if you really want to take your game to the next level, including me, and that's why I came up with the Year of Excellence. What I wanted to do was let me document the very best I've seen. Let me do the research, curate it, condense it into something that reps can take and not have to, read 4 books on this, 5 books on that. The problem with that is, you get a lot of knowledge, but you don't take any action and you forget it and you move forward and you get stuck in the rut. How do you come up with a systematic way within a year, whether you start in January or you start in November? It doesn't matter. You just get into it and get momentum and get what I call compound selling. See, my frustration as a sales rep was I didn't see enough compounding. And I always was obsessed with compound interest ever since I was a kid. And if you want to learn about it, check out Warren Buffett's documentary on HBO. It is pure gold because he was obsessed with it. And the idea is that you don't start like Groundhog Day every day. You build off of every day. You build off of your skills. You become better. You get compound interest. And over time, you get the hockey stick. Now, if you don't do this, you tend to just level off and actually sink because you get burnt out. And I've seen too many of my friends later in their career, they get burnt out and all that skill kind of goes away because their attitude and their motivation isn't there. They didn't compound. So that's kind of the theme of the Year of Excellence. It's going to be included if you sign up for Closing the Complex sale in January. You can buy it all at once, or there's a payment plan. It's not a subscription. It's not a membership. It's a year-long access to all the content from day one. So you'll get all the office hours that I did in 2018, so 25 hours of that. And you can get one-on-one, so you get a sales coach that's here for you. And if there's something that would make the course enticing for you, let me know. You can schedule a call with me at b2brevenue.com. And make sure you're checking out CoVideo. They've done some incredible work. And this year, if you're not using video email, it is a big mistake. You've got to find a way of connecting up with your audience, being organic and natural and authentic. And that's the way to do it. It's different. It's new. It's not really new, but it's new to you. It's going to be new to a lot of your customers, and it's going to be the way to really engage with your marketplace. And you're just going to miss out if you're not doing it. So check that out at covideo.com. Appreciate everybody listening. We'll see you next time.